We are students of the art of play,
And we do this show called The Art of Play.
a show for the players who ask why.
I'm Vi.
And I'm Gaia.
Hey, Gaia. Today we're going to talk about peripherals.
Peripherals. So, what do you mean? What do you mean by peripherals?
That's a great question, and we've flipped the format of this episode. This is not usually the place where I answer. A gaming peripheral is like an accessory that you use to control the game, but it is usually a different device in itself.
Yeah.
It's a different way of controlling the same game. Like you could use a controller or you could use a peripheral device.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about how you interact with your game systems, not just in how you directly control the game with the default controller, but how the game communicates to you and how you communicate back with it. You can imagine a peripheral as any data stream, to use it in a kind of computer sciencey way. If you're sending audio, like listening to music or listening to your game sounds, or if you're sending your voice through your microphone, or if you're getting a vibration on your controller because something has happened in game, or if your keyboard's lighting up, or your mouse is lighting up, or your headphones are lighting up.
Yes.
Or your microphone's lighting up has become the communication standard.
The lighting up is so good. One thing that I love is looking at pictures of gaming setups before they're lit. Have you just little before everything is turned on?
Dull.
Yeah, they're just black or white, right? Usually they're not both, right? And just sort of whatever, computer setup in a desk, neat. And then it's neon pieces and the keyboard's doing stuff, and they have cool light fixtures of behind on the wall. That's one of my favorite things.
But I love that when it's turned off, it's just dull.
Dull. I think it's because I'm just really. Oh, maybe I'm a firefly, actually. I just really enjoy when things are lit well. I have a thing for lamps and lighting fixtures.
Are you sure you're not a moth?
Look, I used to, on my Tinder bio, it used to say that one of my favorite activities was going to Home Depot and standing in the lighting aisle. And I had one person being like, are you sure you're not related to a moth? And I was like, actually, my family comes from a long line of moths.
Why is this not surprising to me in the slightest?
Because it totally makes sense, because it's a bonkers way to start a conversation.
True. So, bringing us back to the topic, today we're going to be talking about all the different ways that you can communicate with your computer or your device, and your computer can communicate with you, like with game information, outside of the standard, here's an Xbox controller, here's a PlayStation controller, here's your Switch Joy-Con or Pro controller.
What's your favorite controller?
Personally, I'm a huge fan of the Switch Pro controller.
Yeah.
But actually, I think one of my best gaming experiences has been with the two Joy-Cons and the Joy-Con controller dock. Because I play a lot of mashing games, and I love mashing the Joy-Con buttons because they have a lot of tactile feedback.
Yeah, they're very crunchy. They
are. You're not wrong.
They are. That's what they feel like.
You're right.
This is part of the conversation we were having just before we started recording. I was like, the tactile response from the Nintendo DS for me was always huge.
Yeah, closing the DS was your favorite emotion.
It was so good. It was the mom wants me to do chores now, bang, perfect. And it's made such a good sound. It was great. The stylus sliding out and putting that back in.
The stylus
experience.
I think I'm starting to agree with you just based on the stylus. Pulling out the 3DS stylus and then extending it slightly was my favorite feeling. Okay, I understand now.
Okay, and the
you just
buttons.
had to hit my specific brand.
I just had to hit the one button. Yeah, and then I think, for me, the way that you could hold the DS was really important to me, and I mean that in that it fit in my hands well, and the buttons clicked just really good.
Yeah. Did you do that thing where you didn't even really use a stylus, you just use your thumb on the screen because it was close enough?
If it was just a quick I have to tap a button.
Yeah.
But if it was I have to draw a picture, then it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Stylus for sure. Yeah.
So that's...
Or the back of your fingernail, I remember being really useful.
That is true.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the big topic for today. But we're going to be
using the back of your finger?
Of talking about peripherals. But we're going to be asking one big question as we go through today's episode. And that's going to be, why have gaming peripherals, for the most part, disappeared? Our goal for today's episode is going to be able to answer that question by discussing the history, the various types of peripherals, those which found success, those which didn't, those peripherals which now are actually just part of gaming. You can imagine that once upon a time, things that we take for granted today were new. But we'll get into that for today's episode. But before we really get into the whole history of peripherals and why they failed, why they became big, where they began, do you have a favorite peripheral, Vi?
You've removed it from the list that we're talking about.
I have removed it from the list.
I saw it and I went, that's a great concept. Terrible execution. What it was essentially if you had taken like the Joy-Cons off a Switch and then put them on either side of a keyboard. I mean, that kind of rules. It's pretty good.
It wasn't even
but
a
also,
Switch. It was a GameCube
Well, it was a
controller,
GameCube, but I'm saying
which
like
was the awkward big A button.
Look, I just think that it's funny.
It is a
terrible.
little silly, I will admit.
And I'm just thinking about how heavy like my gaming keyboard is and how friggin' useless that would be in a game that requires really quick responses.
Oh, you're right. That would be absolutely useless.
Terrible.
Wouldn't it?
It'd be horrible. Anyway, real peripherals that I had was that we had the set of like things that you could put on the Wii controllers.
Right.
Right? Like we had the tennis racket extension and the Mario Kart wheels, which I know you hate.
I don't like the Mario Kart wheel.
That's fine. I also didn't like it. I thought it would make me better at the game. It did not.
I actually think if you play with motion controls, it does make the motion controls a little bit more accessible, but otherwise it does not make you better.
They don't map one-to-one, which is the problem that we talked about when we were talking about like virtual reality and like other gaming systems.
Yeah,
it's like
it was that gulf within of like it doesn't feel right.
If it doesn't map one-to-one, it doesn't feel right, or if it doesn't work in the way that you expect it to. And I think that was always the problem with those.
Well, so I did put the keyboard controller in the chat again for you.
Yay. It's a terrible.
It's so bad.
It's horrible.
So just to kind of put the image in everyone's head, I want you to imagine a keyboard from an old 1990s computer. You know, the big kind of like off-white keyboards with
the ones that would turn yellow like almost immediately.
Yeah. So imagine one of those, but with like a really small space bar with extra buttons in there for some reason. And then on the left hand, you have the left side of a GameCube controller. And on the right end, you have the right side of a GameCube controller. And you hold the entire thing as one long controller that looks to be probably longer than the Nintendo Switch.
So the reason that I was saying like the Joy-Cons is I was just like, yeah, if you took the Joy-Cons and put them on either side of the like keyboard, you've got
the same thing.
You've got the same thing. Yeah.
And that is quite possibly one of the worst controllers I've ever seen.
It's intriguing to me. I like it, but I know that it would suck to use.
I think I've seen a controller as well that had like a drop-down keyboard that you could pull down like a flip phone.
Don't like that.
Like one of the slide phones.
Don't like that.
I don't remember where I saw that. I saw that years ago. But yeah.
That is what you should have for a smart TV controller.
You know what? You're right.
I
don't know if you should say that, but you're right.
I'm sorry? The FBI?
like I don't want to acknowledge that that's a good idea, but I think you're right.
Well,
so to talk about gaming peripherals, I definitely.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Do you remember the remote controls that had like the piece that you could take off with like all of the channel buttons? They were like old, like I don't know. It was like a thing that my grandparents had.
Oh my
like,
god,
with the little,
do.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like a 1990s thing.
Yeah. Okay, that, but a keyboard. For a TV.
Please don't bring those remotes back.
I don't want those remote. I'm just saying, like, the technology already exists.
Technology already exists.
Remote control, lots of buttons. All I'm saying, don't make me use friggin' an arrow key to type. I have problems with my smart TV, and we should move on.
I understand. So, to kind of get an idea of peripherals, and having asked you your favorite being, you know, a generally good peripheral overall, like historically, like the Wii wheel, while not being amazing, was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
And if you weren't used to playing with carts, it really offered a more accessible way to play.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. It was a good, like, accessory for people to understand how things like
because we talked before about how one of the hardest things about getting into gaming is learning the controls and really mapping to it and getting to that point where it feels like an extension of you, like a tool.
And
it's a good middle ground for that.
If you don't really understand how a controller's supposed to work, making the controller physically into a tennis racket, it's like, oh, okay, so I'm supposed to use it like a tennis racket.
Yeah,
got it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what I want to do, though, is give some more examples of peripherals that exist in real life and really kind of go into why they would be good, why they would be bad, and to laugh about them to some degree.
Excellent.
So you can all, as like listeners, already imagine some very basic peripherals. You can imagine your headphones that you have at home, or earbuds if you go that way. You can imagine your webcam, which could be a wide variety of options.
Sorry, just if you swing that way is what I thought you were gonna say, and then you didn't, and I was disappointed.
I was trying to and forgot. But you can also imagine like your computer's mouse and a keyboard, and even the controller that you use for your console, which is the way that you communicate with a console. You can also imagine a microphone that you might have on your desk. You could even imagine some other forms of peripherals, such as one of those wireless charging pods. If you connect it to your computer, that's one way of connecting your phone to your computer to interact with it.
Yep.
That's a peripheral. By every definition, that's a peripheral. But historically, in the realm of gaming, the goal of peripherals has really been to engage the player in another way with the game they're playing, either by making the action they're doing feel more realistic, which, if you remember our topic on motion controls, is not always the best decision, but also to make it more fun and generally to feel different than just press A, throw bowling ball.
There is an amount of novelty that you get with a peripheral that you really don't get with anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's some amazing options that I've written down for this list. 8 that I want to go through, the final of which I think you're going to laugh at. So the first option that I really remember as a kid, I've never played with this, but I knew multiple people who had it, which was on the GameCube. There was a Donkey Kong game that you controlled with a set of bongos where you had to hit the bongos to make him jump and move.
That's good.
And that was a real peripheral. I think it was for a music game. I think it was a Donkey Kong music game. You're supposed to hit the bongos to the beat of the music.
Yeah.
Which is one of the most wild things I've ever imagined.
Well, we'll talk about later how rhythm games are really a place where like peripherals kind of shine.
Yeah, it's kind of where they were more natural. But I do like the way that I wrote this down on the sheet.
Sorry, I'm just imagining playing rhythm games that aren't overtly rhythm games, like Dark Souls, where the combat is rhythm based.
Someone beat Dark Souls with a Guitar Hero controller.
Okay, that's what I was just gonna say. Is you should do it with like I was thinking the drum set.
Yeah, fair point. No one has beaten it with the drum set yet.
All right, anyone who's got a drum set.
I would love to do it with the karaoke microphone.
I don't think it would work.
It does, theoretically.
What would you say?
You sing at various pitches because it reads your pitch.
No, I don't like that at all. You know what? Actually, though, if you could find songs that mapped properly to whatever the combat is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I'd be on board for that. I'd want to see that playthrough.
That would be very fun, actually. I think that sounds hilarious.
Actually, that'd be so good.
But the Donkey Kong bongos were great because they were officially known as the Donkey Konga bongos.
Excellent.
With an A.
Way too many syllables. That's
Not
great.
entirely certain why. And I'm trying to remember which game it was. It was for the game Donkey Konga. There we go. So that makes sense.
Why.
Which was a music game, and you can see where the word conga comes in now.
Sorry, what were they called?
The Donkey Konga bongos.
Okay, that's not actually as bad as I thought it was going to be.
For Donkey Konga.
Yeah.
Which I'm on the Amazon page for Donkey Konga right now, and a used copy is $300.
Yeah, this is the other thing about them, is that they were kind of short-lived. So if you wanted to play, like, I'm sorry, the Garage Hero, Rock Hero,
Guitar Hero?
Thank you, Guitar Hero, with, like, an actual Guitar Hero, you'd have to go find one.
I have one, and it took me a very long time.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, because they were kind of short-lived, like, we have a scarcity problem if you wanted to experience the game in the same way.
Yeah. So to talk about Donkey Konga quickly, just to kind of get an idea of how this peripheral worked, the description for the game is non-stop musical mayhem as you drum along to 30 songs from childhood classics to modern hits. Help Donkey and Diddy Kong clap their way through old and new songs following the rhythm of the tune. Earn coins for keeping up with the beat, and then use the coins to buy new sounds and add new elements to the music. And it's multiplayer up to 4 players.
I was on board with everything you said until you said multiplayer up to 4.
Imagine 4 people
with
these real toy bongos bashing them.
4 10-year-old children in a basement with bongos? The parents are gone.
The parents are not home.
The parents are outside. Yeah.
So let's talk about some other peripherals as well. So we actually, in one of our previous episodes on the history of gaming consoles, talked about a peripheral, and that was the Virtual Boy. So the Virtual Boy was this weird headset that Nintendo had released that doubled as like a console and a peripheral itself that provided a stereoscopic 3D environment for monochromatic games where the monochrome color was red. and I'm dropping an image in the chat. I've realized I haven't sent one to you.
Yeah, I was just trying to. I hate this.
So it was this weird pseudo console.
This looks like a drone from Star Wars prequels.
It looks like a Star Wars prequel drone where you have to put your head up to the red box on the top. So for those wondering, it looks like a big red box on a tripod with a controller attached to it.
So it goes this way.
Yes. It looks like a big red box on a tripod with a controller attached to it, and you'd put your eyes up to it to view your game.
It's like a pod racer goggle set.
Yeah, and the way that it worked, it was meant to be a virtual reality kind of stereoscopic 3D display that was only in monochrome. Again, with red as the color of choice, which is wild. And it failed really bad. And I know we're going to talk a bit later about why Peripherals failed, but I want to talk about this one specifically because I read the Wikipedia and it had, quote, it caused, quote, headaches, had bad colors, had a high cost, was not truly portable, and had numerous health concerns.
Well, yeah,
and I don't know what the health concerns were.
Because you related to the headache, and I would imagine, look how heavy that thing looks.
Well, you were supposed to keep it on the ground. Or on, like, a table.
No.
Right? And the thing is, like, the fact that they've already listed headaches as a problem.
Oh, and then
what are the health concerns?
Eye related.
Probably dizziness and eye problems, yeah. So that thing was wild. But we have a few more that I really want to talk about that I found very interesting. Like the Nest Power Glove.
Do you think that they called this the Virtual Boy, and then they had plans to release it in pink and called the Virtual Girl?
Oh my God.
I'm just saying.
Oh my God, you might be right.
I'm just saying.
I didn't realize. So onto that Nest Power Glove. So the Nest Power Glove was this weird kind of half plastic glove that you would wear that had like a bar just underneath your fingers. And I don't know what that did. I think it was meant to track like if you were closing your hand or not.
This one to me, this feels like something you would see in like a 90s sci-fi film.
Yeah. So imagine this like gray glove with a bar underneath your fingers to track movement.
Well, it's like on top of your knuckles.
Yeah. And there's a cord that then goes to a controller that's around like the top of your arm, around your wrist, on your forearm, that has buttons from 1 through 9, 2 extra buttons on the side, buttons for movement, a center button, start, stop, and 2 others that I have not yet been able to identify. All on one Nest controller.
What character had the thing that they flicked open on their arm? It's the Buzz Lightyear.
It's Buzz Lightyear.
Yeah, it's the Buzz Lightyear like.
It looks
spot.
like an even worse Yu-Gi-Oh deck.
You know what? I still really like this.
I think it looks cool, but here's the thing about this one. This was released and used for a grand total of 2 games.
Well, it's so specific.
And it was meant to be like capture the power in your hands, I think was like the slogan or something like that. And it was meant to be like you point at the screen and open your hand to kind of like shoot like a ball of energy kind of thing.
This would be something that should come out with like Iron Man and Spider-Man games.
Yeah, and here's the thing.
Spider-Man is what I said, not Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, like a last name.
Yeah, but they also used this glove in a movie called The Wizard. And the whole movie was effectively one long advertisement for this glove, which is a wild fact that I've learned. And yes, I will be streaming it on Discord at some point.
Oh, it's so good.
Right?
Here's what gets me about this one is I can see the application for it and I want to use it.
But would you pay $80 for one?
In today's money or in 1990s money?
Today's money. After, COVID inflation.
Oh. Now, here's the key point that I think you'll probably get to in a second here. I think it would depend on what game it came out with.
So it came out with 2 games. I don't know what they were, but those games sold horribly.
Well, I'm saying in today, like today. If this was coming out with a game today, okay. and it came out with like...
I think it would come out with an Iron Man game today.
If it came out with an Iron Man or a Spider-Man game, I can see using this. Except I'd want it to be a pair.
You want 2 gloves?
I want 2 gloves.
So you'll spend $160.
No. I won't.
Okay.
Maybe if I was buying it for my brother. Like, that would be probably a good Christmas present. So, I don't think I could justify doing it for myself.
So the next one that I want to talk about, this time was not made by Nintendo. So consider that the last 3 were all official Nintendo products.
The Power Glove was Nintendo?
Now I'm second guessing myself.
This doesn't look like a Nintendo product.
Did Nintendo make the Nest Power Glove? I need to look this up.
Oh, well, hang on. Well, I don't know. It feels Nintendo-ish, but I don't know. It doesn't say Nintendo on it.
Nintendo.
Did they actually
it was
make it?
officially licensed by Nintendo, but they were not involved in the design or release of it.
Yeah,
But they did license it.
Yeah, that's the thing, is it doesn't actually feel like a Nintendo product.
Okay, so 2 of the previous have been by Nintendo. Then we have the Nest Power Glove, which was licensed by Nintendo. The next one I don't think actually ever got licensed by Nintendo, from what I know, and that's the Wii bowling ball.
This slaps so hard. Can I describe this to you?
Yes.
This looks like a small creature. This looks like a little. It's a blue ball with buttons on the top and a place to charge it. Plug it into the nunchuck, perhaps.
Yep, that was Nunchuck.
Nunchuck. Which seems great to me. I like this thing. It's reminding me a lot of the. Have you seen Good Omens? Anybody listening? This looks like the little reptile guy that gets thrown in the holy water at the end of season 1 of, or maybe the beginning of season 2 of Good Omens. I like it. I think it's great.
So if you want to kind of have an idea for what it looks like, it reminds me of the Dragon Quest slimes, which I just sent in the chat for you, Vi, which are these big blue balls with massive smiley faces on them. And it just makes me think, it makes me feel like I'm throwing one of those guys.
Yeah.
Which is, you know what? That's the exact emotion I want when I play Dragon Quest.
That's fair. You know what's hilarious to me is that it looks so much like a guy, even though it's just like a blue ball with buttons on it.
It's a blue ball with buttons on it.
I think it's because the buttons at the top in the relief of the image kind of look like they should be like ears or something.
They do.
Yeah. Okay. I've got to find an image of this reptile.
Go for it. While you're doing that, I'm going to talk about the ball. So
Excellent.
for those of you who are listening, I want you to imagine right now that you're playing Wii with your parents, right? Like you're playing like Wii Sports with your parents, and you know, there's this problem of sometimes people throw controllers and don't tighten them enough. And then you go up to like your mom, who has never played a video game in her life besides Wii bowling, and is, I don't know, in her 60s. I'm describing my own mom, to be quite honest.
Mom's in her 60s?
Yes. And then imagine passing them an actual bowling ball to fake throw to play Wii bowling.
Wait, I'm sorry. You can't actually throw this ball?
That would break. Look at the construction material. Do you think that would survive being thrown?
Not really, but I was kind of hopeful.
I mean, you could if you want to use it once.
Now, look, at this point, I think you should just go bowling.
Yeah, you should just go bowling. But, like, imagine trying to tell someone to throw but not throw the Wii bowling ball, which is a massive life-sized bowling ball controller for your Wii.
Here, okay, the problem with this, even though I really like the concept, is that it replaces the wrong thing. Like, the controller is the supplement for, like, your hand, right?
Yes.
It's part of the release motion.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. If you're playing it with the bowling ball, the natural thing to do to release is to drop it.
Is to throw the ball.
Yeah, which is not how that game works. So actually that one, it again doesn't map 1-to-1, even though it should make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So Hell's Usher is the character that this guy reminds me of. He's just a round reptile.
that's just a round guy.
He's great, and he dies immediately.
So for other peripherals, I'm going to skip the next one because it's just the Xbox Kinect, which we've talked about in previous episodes. And yes, it's a peripheral. Yes, it's motion controls. Yes, it sucked.
Do they still make?
Not really. It's kind of integrated within the systems now.
Oh, so you still could play Kinect games on the new.
I don't know, actually. I don't play enough Xbox to check. But yeah, so like the Kinect is a peripheral, and everyone knows what the Kinect is, and it kind of sucked. And it was part of the downfall of the Xbox systems for a little while. We'll get to that.
Shame.
But here's another one of my favorites. Did you know that for certain games, you could buy a Game Boy printer, which would connect to your Game Boy and print what was on screen? And I want to say it was glorious 200 by 200 pixels.
Oh, that's so good. I really enjoy that. That's a version of a screenshot that's okay, actually, no, I'm so on board for this because you could go get game guides and print them to play with games at that time.
You could.
That was why you did that. So the ability to print a photo from a Game Boy screen would be so good in making one of those guides because you could like photocopy it into the guide that you're making.
So it was a thermal printer, which I need to add. And
Why?
I probably because that was easier to make.
Well, hang on. So was this the Game Boy this wasn't the Game Boy Color. This was the Game Boy that was just black and white, right?
They started in 1998, which would be roughly the Game Boy Color.
Okay.
It worked with every Game Boy system except the Game Boy Micro, and was designed to be used alongside the Game Boy camera.
What?
Yeah. I'm reading the Wikipedia page for those wondering. It ran on 6 AA batteries.
So many.
That's a lot.
There's so many batteries.
And it was originally sold in white, yellow, red, and blue paper. And they had it in Japan.
What?
In Japan, they released a bright yellow Pokemon version, which had the feed button, which is the button for the printer, in the style of a Pokeball.
It kind of rules.
And here's some of the games that it worked with. Okay, I'm gonna list some wild ones you don't expect and some that you do expect. Okay, so like,
I don't want to guess actually. I just want to hear them.
Yeah. So it worked on Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening.
Yep.
That's cool. It
That's
worked on
fair.
Harvest Moon 2. It worked on Pokemon Crystal, Gold and Silver, Pokemon Pinball, Pokemon Trading Card Game, Pokemon Card GB2. Great
So just
Rocket
the
Fan
Pokemon
Sanjo.
games at the time.
Yep. It worked on Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. And here comes the weird ones. It worked with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. It worked with Alice in Wonderland. It worked with Austin Powers for multiple games. It worked with E.T., the Digital Companion. It worked with Fisher-Price Rescue Heroes Fire Frenzy. It worked with... I'm trying to see other games I would recognize. The Little Mermaid 2 specifically. Mission Impossible, NFL Blitz.
Okay, here's the thing: is I'm imagining, like, you know how the Nintendo DS, like, you could pull out the stylus and like go through a maze and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part of me that's like, oh, of course, you would hook up your Game Boy, print it, solve a puzzle, feed the solution back into the Game Boy as part of the game.
Which I think you could do.
Which, like, that just makes sense to me. But also, like, what?
You could imagine hook Game Boy camera up to your Game Boy Advance. You take a Game Boy photo and print it on your Game Boy printer in thermal paper.
A Game Boy photo.
Yeah, there's no better way to describe that.
Yeah.
Right? And here's the other thing. That's not the only unhinged Game Boy peripheral. Apparently the Game Boy was not free from peripheral madness, unlike the Wii, because there was also the Game Boy sewing machine.
That also slaps.
Which apparently was so good that they made 3 different models, and one of the photos I sent you has all 3, a blue, a red, and a yellow. And they weren't the same. Those are 3 different machines, the final of which could also do embroidery.
What? No. Okay, so when you were like, yeah, Game Boy made a sewing machine, I was like, yes, of course. Like the printer, it was for embroidery. So you could embroider your favorite characters. There was no part of my brain that doubted that was what the sewing machine was initially
only the
for.
third one did.
Why only the third one? What did the first one do? Why could you connect your Game Boy to the first one if it couldn't?
Things.
But you could connect your Game Boy to it.
Yeah, to sew patterns, I guess. I don't know. I have no
idea.
idea.
So could you use the Game Boy to control the sewing machine?
It was paired with a sewing game.
No.
You put into your Game Boy.
I need this.
This is a real thing.
I need this. I'm getting my mom this for Christmas. That's so good.
So that's a real thing. And just to kind of clue up the last few examples that I have, another one that you particularly hate, Vi, was the Resident Evil chainsaw controller.
It's bad.
Which was made for the PS2 and the GameCube. Did not send you the GameCube version.
I don't want to see it.
Which is a full chainsaw.
It just
toy
sucks.
chainsaw that has the controller buttons on top of it in the most awkward way I've ever seen. Imagine trying to hold the base of a chainsaw and press buttons on top like a controller.
It's bad because it's not how a chainsaw works.
Oh, right.
It's just... That's why it's bad. It has nothing to do with how a chainsaw
our resident lumberjack
operates. It's just bad, and I don't like it.
And as one more peripheral, just to kind of clue up that list.
It makes me so grumpy.
And just to pull you away from the chainsaw.
And also, I know it's Resident Evil, but it's covered in blood, and I'm just like, this chainsaw needs to be cleaned.
So another example of peripherals would be the Wii Fit balance board.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Yeah, the Wii Fit balance board is a peripheral. If we're being honest, even with the game Ring Fit, the Ring Fit ring is a peripheral.
I am trying to remember how the balance board was used. Because I didn't have one. I know people's who
I didn't have one either, because it was more for the Wii U than the Wii.
Well, it was also the kind of thing that your mom had. Right? It was because mom used it to play games that were sort of fitness-ish.
Yeah.
Or surfing? Was there a surfing
There was
game?
a surfing and a skateboarding.
Again.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that one makes sense to me.
But that's the idea of peripherals.
Yeah.
So we're half an hour in, and we've kind of gotten the idea of
how
lots of different
wild
peripherals.
They are. Yeah.
So now I want to talk about the weird thing that kind of happened around the mid-2010s, where peripherals disappeared.
Sad.
The Kinect kind of lost its popularity. PlayStation stopped doing its motion controls. The Wii U had very little popularity. Most of the peripherals that we used for other Wii games were gone. For PlayStation games were gone. For PC and mobile games were gone. And peripherals died off. And there's a big question as to why. And I will say that nobody has a solid answer to this. There's no one source. But if I can lay out my theory, and from what it seems to be is a rough agreement on this, let's talk about Guitar Hero. So for those of you who don't know what Guitar Hero is, first, how? Second, to actually explain it, Guitar Hero was a series of music games in the early 2010s and late 2000s.
Why am I also thinking this is called Rock Band? Are these
we'll
two
get
different
there.
games? Okay.
We will get there.
Okay.
So Guitar Hero and Rock Band were two series of music games where you would control the game by using an instrument. It originally began by only using a guitar controller with 5 buttons on it, which was the Guitar Hero guitar controller, I guess, and later on a bass, and then later a drum set and a microphone. They also eventually did a keyboard, and look, they made a whole DJ pad for one of their games, and we're going to get into that. So these games really began with Harmonix, the company Harmonix. So it was kind of known at the time that music games were an untapped potential genre. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. A genre of untapped potential, there we go.
Yeah.
That really was struggling to get people involved, but could be really good if players could kind of get the idea of them. And Harmonix was one of these companies at the time. They had made a pretty small game for music called Frequency, which I think used a peripheral, I can't remember, which didn't sell great, but still kind of was getting the idea out there. They would then later be picked up by Activision and would make another game called Amplitude. Now, both of those games are kind of just a history thing, and the extra credits video goes into way more detail in these games, and we're not going to talk about that. But then they were picked up by Activision to make a game called Karaoke Revolution 1, and then a year later, Karaoke Revolution 2. This was a game that you would use a microphone to sing in that would map not only if you were making sound at the right time, which is what old games would do, but also if you were making the correct pitch of sound. So you didn't need to say the words, but you could just go like, ooh, to kind of get the sound right.
Sure.
And it would give you points based on how accurately you were hitting the pitches and the timing for the song you were singing. And this, we're talking like early 2000s. So this was revolutionary for the time. We're talking like PS2.
Yeah.
Right? And at that point, I think they were picked up by Activision for that. They may have been working with Activision, but Harmonix would be bought out by Viacom, and a new company would appear called Red Octane, which Activision would pick up. And what happened around this point was Activision wanted to make a big, large-scale, entertaining, engaging music game where you had to play the music for kids. And Red Octane, which had experience in this field by now as another music developer who didn't have the big hit games, would come up with Guitar Hero, a game where you would play guitar to the sound, to the rough sound of the music that you were listening to. But Harmonix was still active in the scene with Viacom, which would actually be bought by EA, for reference. And with them, they would make the game Rock Band. And both of these games function so similarly that I can describe them the same. You have a guitar, you press a button, strum the guitar to activate the note. And if you do it in the right time with the right buttons pressed, you get points. And if you fail to do so, you hear that horrible scratching sound that tells you that you failed. And the beauty of Rock Band at this time was that they did more instruments than guitar. They were the first one to say, let's do drums, let's do bass.
Yeah.
That was pretty much it. And let's incorporate that microphone that we already designed.
This was again the playdate to the basement where all of this stuff lived.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is in that like sweet spot era.
And I want to kind of put an idea out there about these peripherals for a second. Because, Vi, let's imagine back then that a game was $60. Right?
Yeah.
You buy Guitar Hero for $60. How expensive was the Guitar Hero controller back then?
Oh, you're asking the wrong person. Probably,
Make a guess.
50.
So, yeah, that's pretty much spot on. It was effectively the cost of the game. So buying Guitar Hero would cost you twice as much. But people loved it and were buying it. The drum set went for well over $100.
Yeah.
The bass was the same price as guitar. The microphone was roughly the same price because it was more complicated to operate. And these were just little plastic devices that did not cost that much to make and were rolling in bank for these companies.
Yeah.
And these were very entertaining. Imagine back then where Spotify, Apple Music, and were not a product. There was no real on-demand music service back then. But you could load up your favorite game and play a song with your favorite artist. You could play Metallica. You could play the Beatles. You could play ABBA.
Wasn't this around the same era that like Just Dance was releasing every year with like updated songs and stuff?
Yes,
weren't they
roughly
releasing
the same time.
They were releasing every year though with like new updated songs, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every 1 or 2 years, I think, back at this point, right? And Guitar Hero and Rock Band both realized that what's the selling point for these games? If the game has your favorite song and the other game doesn't.
Yeah.
So they would start signing these exclusive contracts with music developers to have their songs in their game and not the other game, not the other series.
Yeah.
And they started releasing more and more games. And this was actually one of the first real-life examples of DLC. Because they would add new songs as DLC packs.
Oh, cool.
And people wanted DLC. They wanted more songs, so they would buy the DLC. They would download the DLC pack.
Yeah.
And can you see where this would go wrong?
I mean, like vaguely, yeah.
Well, here's problem number 1. There's only so many songs that you can add to your games before you've run out of big popular hits.
Yeah.
You're going to have to go more and more niche, songs that are less well known, songs that people don't care about anymore. And who wants to buy the game full of songs they've never heard?
Yeah.
Even I only play a set of like 20 songs on Just Dance out of like the 300 that you can play now.
Well, yeah, because that's all your music taste too.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like, especially for Just Dance, like you listen to that a couple of times while you're doing it because like you want to get it right. You have to practice it. Yeah.
And we can also imagine, so they were making a lot of money from these controllers. You buy the game once, you buy a guitar, you buy a bass, you buy a drum set, you buy a mic, you have invested over $400.
Yeah.
Right? You want to play Rock Band, you have to go buy all of its equipment. So they knew once people...
this is why everybody... This is why everybody I knew who really liked these games had 2 of everything.
Yeah.
Because they had 2 different games.
And if they weren't super into it, they had one or the other, which meant once someone invested in your product, they're never going to leave to the other person.
Yeah.
So you just need to pull them in. But think about this. $400 to really invest in a full setup. How were these companies making their money? Not from the games.
From the controller.
The games probably lost them money because of all the contracting.
Yeah.
They money from the controllers. Yeah. And here's the thing. Once you've bought a controller, it works with the next game. Why? If it didn't, you wouldn't buy the next game.
Yeah.
So you can imagine a few years into this plastic guitar arms race, which is what it was. Like, and really, that's what it was.
Plastic guitar arms race is another shirt that would be so good.
That is the first shirt with 4 words so far, though. Usually it's 2 words.
Are they all 2?
They're all 2 up until now.
Druid and Joyer.
I'm glad you remember them. But you can imagine...
That one's just good.
But yeah, it is. But you can imagine that the value for these games was dropping off a cliff. There were less interesting songs. People already bought the instruments. People kind of cared less about the games. And they started releasing these targeted games. Like, I think it was Rock Band or Guitar Hero released a Van Halen game. And all of the songs were Van Halen and
I mean, if you liked Van Halen, that's great.
Yeah, and they made a Beatles game and an ABBA game. But you can start imagining where this is going to be a problem. Because I think the number of people who are interested in a variety of music is larger than the number of people who would buy an entire game to play Beatles songs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like if you... Yeah. Trying to imagine what Rock Band DLC would appeal to me now. And I think the trouble is that, like, that's probably part of it, is like your music taste is more diverse than one artist.
And that's exactly it. So what ended up happening is these games really started to lose their popularity and they started to fall off a cliff. And these games were the kings of peripherals. Everyone knew how to do peripherals because these games are so successful. Yeah. You wanted to be a successful peripheral maker, you would copy these games. And these games destroyed each other in terms of business, ran out of what they could sell. And then in 2014 to 2016, they both stopped making games entirely. And accordingly, I heard, this has not been confirmed, but it looks like that Harmonix got sold off for a grand total of $50.
Really?
A full company. One of the most successful gaming companies in history.
$50.
$50.
That's
Now,
rough.
you have to imagine whoever they sold it to also acquired all of the debts.
Yeah.
So $50 was probably meant to be like, hey, you're buying the debts, but you get the company and you get the rights. And it's never been used since.
Dang.
And Guitar Hero's not a thing anymore. And this is the wild part. You can imagine that Normally, when a game series dies, you get spiritual successors. You can imagine, like, Banjo and Kazooie got replaced with, what was that game with the snake? I can't remember what it was called now. There was Ukulele.
Oh.
Banjo-Kazooie eventually had a spiritual successor of Ukulele. Paper Mario had the spiritual successor of Bug Fables, which is still one of my favorite games.
Oh, yeah. I guess there really isn't.
Yeah.
Do we have like a trend of rhythm games that follows this?
Well, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
So, like, you could think about other games of, like, Dungeon Keeper had War for the Overworld as a spiritual successor. But Guitar Hero and Rock Band don't. There's been no spiritual successor. There's been no game that says connect your controller and play, except for the open source Guitar Hero called Clone Hero, which that doesn't count, right?
Yeah.
It's an open source thing of just emulating Guitar Hero. No one's done it. And now we can ask why. Because there was one thing that was revealed by the downfall of these games and the general trends on the Wii as a whole, and that's the simple adage of gaming peripherals never sell.
Well, gosh, that's such a simple answer. It feels like it should be more complicated, but I understand why it isn't.
But we talked about this in a previous episode too.
Yeah.
If you have to pay double to play a game, are you going to?
Not going
Look,
to.
I'm not even buying Baldur's Gate yet because it's $80 despite it winning Game of the Year now. But
Great
it's
game.
good.
Great game.
Do you think I would spend $150 to play a new game?
Absolutely
Skyward Sword was hard to access on the Wii because you needed Wii Motion Plus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and even mapped to a different console, it was bad.
Yeah, even
Yeah.
mapped to a new console, it had difficulties.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that people today are simply just not really willing to spend that much money to play a single game. Would you buy a whole $100 Kinect to play the motion control games that Kinect offers? And let's extend this a little more. Would you spend $1,000 on a VR headset to play the VR games?
No.
Would you spend $500 on a VR headset? That's the Oculus Rift.
No.
Would you spend $200 for the Oculus Quest 2? Actually, I think it's more than that, but you get the idea. Like, even
probably
then,
not.
that's
Yeah.
too much, right? I wouldn't even buy one of those things that turns your phone into VR.
Yeah,
Although
no.
those are really bad,
Yeah.
right?
That sounds like a headache
People
in a box.
don't want to buy expensive peripherals. And
Yeah.
now they've mostly disappeared. You can think about what peripherals are available for you today. The Switch has a few, and no one buys them. They just collect dust in the Walmart shelves. I don't even know what they have at this
What?
point. I just see them.
I was going to say, like, what are they? Like, just other Joy-Con?
Very similar, like attach your Joy-Con to a device like you would
Yeah.
the Wiimote. But no one buys them because no one needs
No,
them
'cause
anymore.
you don't need
and there's
them.
not really any games that use them anymore.
I mean, and the only thing that I have bought additionally for my Switch is the Pro Controller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a glove you can buy for Just Dance that keeps the controller on the back of your hand so that you can put your hand on the ground.
Yeah, fair enough.
I have wanted to buy that for years now. I want that so
that's
bad.
good.
Like, I've played hundreds of hours of Just Dance and I still haven't bought that glove. Right? It's a glove.
It's one of those things. It's like, how much better can this experience get? Not that much.
Yeah, not
better.
much.
Yeah.
Right? I do want it because there's a few songs you have to go on the ground and then stand back up using your right hand, which is
Yeah.
where my controller is.
Yeah.
And that hurts.
I will say that the like peripherals of like keyboard and mouse and headphone thing, that's always a market.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just like you can upgrade an accessory, but you don't need a new specific accessory like a peripheral to play certain
because
games.
you need
It's
those
just
things
like
to control your game.
Yeah.
You can imagine, I think the PS4 had a slight touchpad on their controllers that you could use.
Oh,
the glowing
yeah,
thing
yeah,
was a
yeah,
touchpad.
yeah, yep.
So you no longer needed touch controls because your controller had it.
Yep.
Controllers added vibration so that the game could communicate with you in more ways. And now you don't need to buy that weird vibrating controller for the PS2 that was a separate accessory. That was just, it was a rectangle that vibrated, and that's the end of that discussion, right? The controllers have so many more options now for how you can communicate with your device. You can put macros on a PC keyboard. You can put buttons on headphones if you want.
if you were if you really wanted to.
I mean,
yeah.
many earbuds have buttons for changing
Look,
volume.
You can connect a controller to your laptop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And all these weird peripherals, like even motion controls are involved in most controllers now. Most Xbox and PlayStation controllers do have a way of tracking motion if they need it, and the Switch inherently is just advanced Wiimotes.
Yeah.
Right?
I again, like the I'm going to say this, people are going to disagree with me, and it's okay.
But will I disagree with you?
That's really what I'm concerned about. I think the best gaming setup is what I have right now. One mobile system, okay? Switch, right? One console.
Yep, Switch. Could be Steam Deck.
Yeah, fair enough. Like one console that is portable that you can take your gaming with you in a smaller space.
Yes.
And gaming PC or laptop.
One major at-home console, one transport console.
Transportable. That's it.
I agree.
And I think that your phone can count as mobile.
I think your phone is more when you're in a doctor's office mobile level, not like I think a Switch is
I'm
traveling to visit my parents.
Exactly.
mobile.
Or like, hey, I have to have something to do on the plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's 3 categories there, and the thing is, the phones have spelled the death of mobile consoles for years now because of their ability to be a console.
They're a really powerful device.
You can play League of Legends on them now.
Look, you can play anything on them.
I'm glad you immediately just moved away from League of Legends.
Well, like, of course you can. Like,
yeah.
Like, of course you can. But I don't know what else you wanted me to add to that. Like, yes, great, you can do that.
But you're right. Like, people don't want to buy a lot. They want to buy more games. They want to have more experiences.
Yeah, they want to have something that is efficient, but also, like, the other thing with a peripheral is that you have to learn the controls for the peripheral before you can play the game, and it doesn't map to anything else.
And that harms the accessibility of the console.
Yeah.
Right? Now, sometimes a peripheral does improve accessibility. Like, again, back to the Wiimote wheel.
Wiimote thing. Yeah.
Right? The wheel does allow it to, but you also can just hold a Wiimote sideways and use the motion controls.
Well, definitely. I'm thinking, but the learning curve, like the beginning of a learning curve is where a peripheral really kind of shines.
Yeah.
Right? It's because, hey, Grandpa, do you want to play Wii Tennis with me? Okay, let me get the tennis racket for you so that you understand how it works.
Yeah.
Great. That's super cool. It's just a tool. But when you're going to play on your PC or you're going to play on your Switch or like with a controller,
you're not going to take out the Resident Evil chainsaw.
You're just not. You're going to use the controller.
You're going to use the thing that feels like a tool.
Yeah.
That is generally enough for you to use for anything.
Yeah, I'm not going to learn a whole new like keyboard setup to type an essay. I'm going to use the thing that I know.
And also, we can add that a lot of things that used to be peripherals really are being incorporated nowadays.
Yeah.
Laptops come with webcams. Yep. The 3DS came with a webcam. The Switch does actually have a webcam on it, I think. I think it has a front-facing webcam, but not a back-facing. I need to go check, but I think the Switch has a front-facing webcam.
Pretty sure it doesn't. What would it connect to?
I don't know, but I think it has one. Does the Nintendo Switch have a camera? Oh, there's 2 on the Joy-Con controllers. Oh, that's the IR camera.
Yeah, it's the IR camera. It doesn't have a webcam.
I thought it had a webcam, but 3DS has a webcam.
The 3DS
right?
has a webcam.
And most computers come with one, right? Like, it used to be that if you wanted to do an intense sound on your computer, you'd have to buy a separate sound processor, like a sound card.
Yeah.
And that just every computer has one now.
Yeah.
Right? You want to listen to good audio, you just plug your headphones in.
You just want if you want better audio, you just get better headphones.
And you don't even always need headphones because most devices have speakers. So if you can't get headphones, you don't need them, right? And the Switch has a touchscreen.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can interact with it like a touchscreen as well. And that's the thing about modern gaming, that we don't really need peripherals.
Yeah, and you don't really need a novelty thing because everybody who kind of games is like, I get it. You press buttons, and these are the buttons you press and moving on.
Even though it would be very cool to have some... I want the Power Glove. I want the NES Power Glove.
I want the Power Glove.
But, like, I want... When I played Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid, I wanted the full Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Is you don't want the thing that kind of emulates what you want. You want the thing that you want.
Yeah.
Right?
But the thing is, if I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Online... I'm just going to drag the cards onto my screen because I'm not going to design a custom-built card scanner to understand which cards I'm placing for my hand and then try to convince everybody that I'm not cheating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like I actually really enjoy the era we're in. I understand the novelty of peripherals. I get why they were a thing. Super, like, kind of fun, but I like that every time I pick up a new game, I don't have to relearn the controls necessarily.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, same thing, right? I can start doing this.
And also, that is also because you're more experienced and have played more games.
Oh, yeah,
and most games use the same controls. And as a little bonus to kind of clue up the episode a little bit, I have just sent you an image of the inflatable Mario Kart go-kart.
Do you know what this reminds me of?
What does it remind you of?
I don't know if you have this experience, but we had fundraising campaigns at school where you would win weird prizes like inflatable couches and stuff like that.
Right.
Like just weird, cheap novelty prizes, but like the big stuff was stuff like this. Like I can imagine this being a prize for one of those fundraising things.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so what it is an inflatable. It's a chair, but it is a go-kart that you could put the Wii controller in. So instead of, it's a driving setup, So instead of just having the
Right.
wheel and sitting on the couch, you sit in this little cart. It does say essential for Wii racing games.
It does say essential
which is
for Wii racing games.
fundamentally a lie.
Also, for another one, there was a peripheral for the Game Boy that was a fishing rod.
Are you sending it to me? I'd love
I'm
love
getting
to see
it.
that.
So there was a peripheral for the Game Boy, which was effectively like a fake little controller fishing rod. Which
Wait,
was
sorry, for the Game Boy?
Yes, it was made by Sega.
Not for a console, for the Game Boy.
I mean, they made it for a Sega console first. But yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, they made it was called the Super Rod, I want to say. No, it was not the Super
It's a
Rod.
bad name.
I can't remember it now. I remember seeing it during my research that there was a fishing rod. Oh no, it wasn't a Game Boy fishing rod. It was for a Sega console. But the Game Boy had a sonar that you could connect to it for fishing.
I don't. Okay. Well, all right.
Yeah.
Like, it's a game sonar.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I think it did real life sonar detection.
Why?
I don't know. There was also one of my favorite was the Dragon
This
Quest
is also
slime
the era
controller.
of like, what can we do with games?
Yeah.
Like what thing can we add?
There was the Dragon Quest slime controller, which is still one of my favorite devices that I've ever seen because it is a spherical, more ovoidal, gaming controller in the shape of the Dragon Quest slime with its face on the bottom, staring at you while you're gaming. And it had the largest input delay of any controller I've ever seen.
This is horrible. This genuinely freaks me out. I don't.
And here's the worst part is we just gave this whole discussion on how gaming peripherals are dying off. This is for the Nintendo Switch.
No.
Hold on, let me find the Switch box. Like very seriously, there is a controller in the shape of a Dragon Quest slime, and it does feel like you're holding a circle.
Like, okay, part of me wants to be like, that must be more ergonomic. Like, I'm thinking about like how people make like really chunky crochet hooks because they're better for your hands.
Yeah.
This doesn't
It's not.
seem like it would do that.
It feels like you're holding a sphere. You're holding a bowling ball with buttons on it.
There's an emotion in my chest right now that I'm having a really hard time placing.
Would it help if I told you there were multiple colors?
God, I can't imagine that it would.
They came in gray and light blue as well.
These are not different colors.
There's a gray one. Is gray not a color?
Do you know what is really freaking me out? So the eyes of the original one don't have a black outline, but the other two do. They look traumatized.
They do look traumatized.
They've seen some shit.
I found someone who decorated theirs and put it on a golden chest with a crown. And I think that's the best use for that controller.
Yeah, that's how you should use that.
That's a Switch dock, by the way.
You know what? I like it. I think that's cool. I want more. This is okay. Here's my opinion on this. If you're gonna do a peripheral now, Nintendo, if you're listening to our little show that we do in Fredericton, New Brunswick,
For some reason.
cool. Thank you for listening. Also, I just want more cool docks. Like, give me something I don't have to hide. Let me make it look cool. That's my qualm with the Switch dock. Is
I
it's
want
like
more
here's a
background
box.
colors on the Switch menu because there's only black and white, and
I
they
want-
said they were going to release more. And they
I
didn't.
want a Legend of Zelda themed background.
I would love a Legend of Zelda themed background. I use a Pokemon Omega Ruby version for my 3DS.
Yeah. Why do you keep sending me these?
We're mid-recording. I'm just spamming her with images of the Dragon Quest slime
I
controller.
don't like him. He looks fearful.
So
And like he needs me to know something, but there are people listening who can't know that he's breaking rules by telling me.
So for those of you listening, for some homework today at the end of this, please go look up the Dragon Quest slime controller. It's great. So
It might be the Red Bull, but it really feels like he's looking into my soul. Gaia, genuinely, I don't like this man.
Sorry, for those wondering, she sent me a zoomed-in photo of it.
I don't like him. I think he looks goofy.
He's goofy. That's the point. He's the level 1 slime that you kill at the start of the game.
That's so sad, too. So he's there for like a minute, and then you kill him?
I think. I've never played Dragon Quest.
Oh.
So, for those of you listening, that's a summary on the history of gaming peripherals and kind of why they died off. And there's the question of, do we ever think gaming peripherals will come back? And no, not really.
Not especially.
We don't need a long 20-minute segment to describe the future of gaming peripherals. There isn't one.
I do want a prettier Switch dock.
Yeah, but like, the dock is a required
It's an
peripheral.
accessory.
Yeah, it's a required peripheral.
Yeah.
Actually, not even peripheral. It doesn't help you communicate with your console.
This is the same way where I'm like, oh, I want a new gaming headset. Like, it is not necessary for the game. It's not really
It's
true
a want,
peripheral,
not a
but
need.
it's like, yeah. Well, so is sort of all gaming things.
Relaxation is a need.
That's
But
true.
With
That's fair.
that is everything we have for today's episode. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we leave, Vi? Besides how much you hate the Dragon Quest Slime controller?
Well, unfortunately, that was my little sign-off note. If you ever get me this controller as a gag gift, I will genuinely be upset. Do not do this.
I think it's like $80.
Don't do it. Don't even, like, if you find a broken one on Kijiji, I don't want it. If you spend any more than $5 on this gift, no, I don't want it. This is a threat.
This is a threat.
Understood. I will use the Resident Evil chainsaw.
It's $200.
No.
Used.
No.
And with that,
used.
Yeah, because they don't sell them anymore.
Oh.
And
no,
with that,
I will use the Resident Evil chainsaw, even though I hate that one too, and I will do terrible things to your espresso machine.
Oh no. And with that, thank you all for listening. I've been Gaia.
I've been fine. This is the first time we've closed the episode with me making threats.
It is. Have a good one.
Bye.
And that's it for today's episode. But what if you wanted to listen to more? Well, our new episodes come out every Thursday at 9 p.m. Atlantic, and there are 3 different ways that you can listen. If you're in the Fredericton area of New Brunswick, Canada, you can listen live on CHSR 97.9 FM through any of your radio services. If you're not in this region or you prefer using the internet, you can tune in on chsrfm.ca at the same time, 9 p.m. Atlantic. As well, we release all of our episodes on a number of podcasting platforms online, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. So if you wanted to, you could go back right now and listen to Season 1, where Vi and I do a deep dive into the fundamental concepts of game design, rather than the hardware they'll be taking up this season. Anyways, thank you for listening, and have a good one.